The story occurred in a river which ran through my village. People frequently drowned in the area due to the vast and deep currents. At the time, there was a family who stood by the river, all with sad expressions, looking at the water and lamenting. The reason was that their son drowned while bathing in the river, so they sought the assistance of Mr. Kang, who specialized in retrieving dead bodies from the river. Because it has been many hours with no results, the deceased family was concerned. All of a sudden, at the precise moment, the man pointed to the water and exclaimed loudly, "Come back! Come back!" With their expectant eyes, the three-person family looked down at the river. They saw Mr. Kang and his wooden boat. Mr. Kang, who had a shabby and austere face, worked as a boatman on the river as well as a body picker. The victim's family was very worried and anxiously waited for Mr. Kang's wooden boat to arrive. The boat approached the shore slowly. The river was now rising, so the boat swayed, and Mr. Kang had to work hard to keep the boat afloat. Next, Mr. Kang quickly rowed to shore. When Mr. Kang's boat docked, the victim's three family members looked at the wooden boat, worried, and the mother's face was sad. There was nothing in the dug-out canoe but a fishing net. With tears in her eyes, the mother asked Mr. Kang if he could retrieve her son's body, her voice filled with pain. Mr. Kang did not respond, instead quietly raising his wrist, which had a rope attached to it. He stretched one end of the rope into the water while the other appeared to be tied to a heavy object, and he was attempting to pull it. Mr. Kang's face became dull and solemn. He still did not open his mouth to speak, but his gaze was fixed on the river's surface. When Mr. Kang pulled the rope out of the water, a white corpse's arm was pulled out with it, shocking everyone. It turned out that Mr. Kang tied the body with a rope and dragged him to the shore. According to locals here, drowning people should not be put on the boat because it would be very unlucky. Mr. Kang remained silent as he brought the body ashore. He then turned around and returned to the boat. As the mother witnessed the pitiful scene unfolding in front of her eyes, she sobbed and screamed as she gazed at her son's corpse. Mr. Kang was used to such scenes, and he rowed away calmly. Mr. Kang's boat was about to leave the dock when a man reached out and called out to him. "Mr. Kang, wait!" The man presented Mr. Kang with a large sum of money in exchange for Mr. Kang retrieving their son's body. Mr. Kang, on the other hand, refused the money and sailed away. "I'm not doing this for the money. Take care of your son's funeral well. I'm leaving." Mr. Kang did not despise money. Rather, a heartbreaking incident in his past had changed his mind. Previously, Mr. Kang had both rowed and caught fish in the river. If there was any dead body floating in the river, Mr. Kang would also pick it up to take advantage of some extra money. The story took place 5 years ago. Only Mr. Kang was famous for picking up dead bodies in the river. When the body of the victim was discovered, Mr. Kang did not immediately hand it over to the victim's family, instead allowing them to kneel and beg on the shore. Because the poor couple did not have enough money to pay Mr. Kang, they prayed and pleaded with him to reduce the price to allow them to receive their son's body. So Mr. Kang thought for a while and then lowered the price. However, the price was still too high in comparison to the poor couple's family, so the old woman cried out and begged Mr. Kang to be merciful and reduce the money for them. When confronted with the situation, the old man cried out and said, "I beg you, we will pay you a little in advance. The rest we will borrow and pay you later." Having said that, both the old couple continued to bow their heads to Mr. Kang, who was still holding the rope to hang their son's body and considering the old man's suggestion. Mr. Kang then agreed to accept the money and delivered the body to the old couple for them to bring it back. Mr. Kang's wife died young, and the family had a daughter who married as well. Because she was concerned that her father would be alone, she would come home every weekend and took advantage of making a delicious meal for Mr. Kang. Today, having a good amount of money, Mr. Kang happily bought wine and meat ready for a delicious meal with his dear daughter. He handed his daughter the large piece of pork he was holding in his hand and told her to make the casserole. Mr. Kang's daughter was now his only source of comfort. He was overjoyed that his daughter still came here to cook for him on a regular basis. Previously, the daughter had opposed Mr. Kang's drinking, but today she not only cooked a delicious meal, but she also bought her father a bottle of good wine. Father and daughter had dinner together and told each other many amusing stories. Mr. Kang then pondered and asked his daughter, "Is there anything you want to tell, Dad?" Mr. Kang's daughter just said that she was very happy because he was always healthy and happy, but she wanted to say something that she always kept in her heart. It turned out that the daughter was always opposed to her father doing the job of picking up dead bodies for wages. The villagers claimed that Mr. Kang was dishonest when he took advantage of the unscrupulous job to make money. Mr. Kang raised his face before his daughter finished speaking. He used to hear people whispering behind his back saying such things, but now even his daughter was opposed to his work. His wife died young, and he had to do everything he could to earn money to raise her. Mr. Kang didn't care what other people said, but today, hearing his daughter say that, he felt disappointed. Mr. Kang immediately stood up, enraged, and scolded his daughter for failing to sympathize with him. Mr. Kang walked out angrily after arguing with his daughter, refusing to look back even though his daughter was calling him. Mr. Kang was extremely frustrated at the time, and even his own daughter looked down on him. Mr. Kang had only taken a few steps outside when it began to rain. He felt as if God was against him. Mr. Kang walked back to the shack where he used to rest by the river in the rain. He lay in the shack with wet clothes, huddled up, and it showed that Mr. Kang was very cold and sad. He couldn't help but cry when he thought about everything that had happened and how much bitterness he had suffered. It kept raining continuously. Mr. Kang had no idea when he fell asleep. All of a sudden he vaguely heard the sound of rain outside the shack, mixed with his daughter's voice calling him. He got to his feet and looked outside where he saw his daughter standing in the rain calling to him. Mr. Kang ignored his anger when he saw his daughter soaking in the rain. Fearing that his daughter would catch a cold from the rain, he quickly ran out of the shack. Mr. Kang looked at his daughter as she stood outside in the rain, knowing how much his heart ached. It was just that his daughter's behavior was a bit strange. She begged Mr. Kang to forgive her for her words earlier, and in the end she said she had to go away, so she came to see him one last time. Mr. Kang found it difficult to understand where his daughter was going as a result of these words. He was being hesitant when his daughter turned around and walked into the river. Mr. Kang rushed forward to stop her, but what he didn't expect was that his hand had already passed over his daughter's body. His hands were shaking. Standing dumbfounded, he kept calling his daughter's name. A hunch told him that his daughter had an accident and tried to come back here to see him. Mr. Kang sadly called out his daughter's name, but to no avail. The daughter went to the cold river bank. The father's heartbreaking scream was drowned out by the sound of rain, making the pain of losing a child almost interminable. From the moment Mr. Kang walked out, the daughter went along the river to find her father, but unfortunately fell into the river and drowned. From then on, Mr. Kang rowed on the river to help retrieve the dead body and didn't take a penny. I was a comic book writer due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I worked from home most of the time. In a time of running out of ideas, I went online to read more horror comics as usual, but I never expected to encounter a true horror story that happened in my hometown. The story happened with a man fishing by the main river of the village. He started fishing early in the morning, but it was not until noon that his fishing rod would vibrate. The man saw this, immediately tugged on the fishing line, but it was as if someone stopped him. It took a long time before he was able to pull the rod up and see a big fish. Thinking that he had caught a great deal today, the man was shocked to see the fish's body in front of him. It was no longer a whole fish, because its belly had lost a large piece of flesh, exposing both bones and internal organs. The man who saw the fish was also surprised, not knowing that the bottom of the deep lake was a strange monster, and it was the killer who ate his fish. This monster discovered that a fish was caught in the distance, so it swam to a cup of half of the fish's flesh. After eating, he returned the fish to the hook and quietly swam away without leaving a trace. The man left without thinking. That was why no one in the village knew about the strange story. The following day, a group of women from the village went to the cornfield, located right next to the river, to harvest. Each person picked corn from their field and put it in a basket hanging behind his back. By midday, a woman had already harvested enough corn. She happily greeted everyone and left first. She went straight home, through a cornfield about as tall as an adult, in the direction to the other riverbank. The other two women, seeing this, also quickly harvested their corn and then carried all the corn on their backs and left. On the way, the two also passed by the riverbank. They saw the woman earlier in the middle of the lake. Feeling a little curious, they also stopped to take a look. Both of them saw the woman below was struggling and not knowing what to do, so they stood up from the shore and asked. Hearing the sound of people, the woman in the lake seemed to have met a benefactor, hurriedly shouted for help and pointed at the water, causing the other two women to look at each other. The water in the river kept flowing, but the water level was not too high. Strangely, the woman in the water just burst into tears while reaching for the shore to ask the other two women to help. The two women who saw this also felt troubled. Both of them wanted to come down to help, but neither of them dared to do so. They started looking at each other, discussing to find a long branch of the tree to pass down to the woman below. At the moment, there were footsteps from away. They happily turned around and saw a village man coming from afar. Two hurriedly shouted to the man for help. After seeing the incident, the man quickly went down to help the woman in trouble. The man swam with the fast-flowing water to the woman's place. He reached out his hand as a pedestal for the woman to cling to and tried to bring her to the shore. But when he just got down to the place, the woman was sinking deeper and deeper into the water. He tried, no matter how, he could not lift the woman. He firmly held the rope tied to the cow, and the two girls on the shore tried to push the cow back to borrow more pulling power, pulling both people out of the water. It took a very long time for the cow's strength to pull them both out of the deep water and out of danger. The two with wet bodies were finally safe on shore. The man was trying to dry his clothes while the woman was crying, making everyone curious. Her two friends had to try and ask her to tell her everything in tears. Her face was still full of haunting fear. She told everyone she was pulled down by something in the lake. To prove it, she even rolled up her pants, revealing a big person's handprint still imprinted in black on her leg. Seeing the handprints on the woman's legs, everyone panicked. Everyone worriedly asked her what the hell was dragging her down. But the poor woman couldn't see the killer's face. She just said the hand of this thing was human-like, but slimy like the body of a fish. She recounted at that time she was on her way to bring corn to her house when she passed this lake. On the way, suddenly the woman heard someone calling her, startling her, so she turned to see who it was. But when she turned into the direction of the voice, she saw no one. only a pair of beautiful shoes on the water. Based on the size and shape of the shoe, she knew it would fit her foot well, especially the pattern burned on the shoe. She guessed it was an expensive shoe that someone rich had lost. So the woman decided to leave the corn basket on the shore, pulled up her pants herself and waded into the water to pick up the shoes. But when she was only a few inches from the shoes, suddenly the water moved, creating small waves, pushing the shoe further and further away from the shore. The woman loved the shoe so much, forgot about the danger, waded into the water herself and decided to get the shoes. But at the same time, waves came from nowhere, washed away the shoes in front of her. She was dragged down by some invisible force at the bottom of the lake. After hearing the story, the man seemed very annoyed, so he told the three women to go home and he was prepared to catch something strange at the bottom of the lake tonight. Hearing his words, the women brought back all the corn they harvested. The strange story was also hidden by all four people. No one knew anything more. Thinking that the story was over that night, a young man in the village encountered a strange thing at this very riverbank. He accidentally passed by the riverbank when he heard strange sounds coming from behind the bushes by the riverbank. The curious young man went to the bush to check it out, but he didn't see anything unusual and lingered for a long time to look. Later, not knowing what this young man witnessed in the middle of the night, but immediately screamed and ran away. Then he ran home and turned back with one of his brothers. They carried a large fishing net towards the riverbank. Both began to choose a hidden place for themselves behind the tall trees for easy monitoring. In the middle of the night, the water below the river's surface suddenly appeared in waves like it was a giant moving below. Knowing that the time had come, the two young men slowly went out prepared, waiting for the mysterious thing to appear. Then they would throw the net down to catch it. Fortunately, at that moment, the sound of that strange creature resounded not far from where the two young men were standing. The young man saw this, determined not to lose opportunity. Immediately threw his big net into the water. A loud noise rang out, grabbing the underwater creature, but it was unclear what was below that the young man alone could not pull up. The companion who was with him also went in to help, but no matter how much the two of them worked together, they could not pull the net up easily because of the creature's weight below. Both were still pulling the net. The net was slowly lifted out of the water, slowly and heavily. The two young men began to estimate that it could only be an adult, but there was no way a fish would weigh that much. After much hard work pulling the net, the two young men finally brought the net ashore. Both excitedly opened up to see what the mysterious creature was. Unexpectedly, it did not get the desired result. In the nets was a giant fish they had never seen since. Moreover, from the fish's belly was also a large piece missing. From then on, people in the village spread stories about the riverside having a monster that no one dared to approach anymore.
Two years ago, for the convenience of work, I moved to live in an apartment near my company. That afternoon, after coming home from work, I sat on the living room sofa and watched TV, as usual. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. At that moment, I thought I heard wrong, or the people outside knocked on the wrong house, because I did not know anyone in this apartment complex. But then the knock on the door continued. The outsiders claimed they were the police. I was very confused. Why are the police looking for me? When I opened the door, it was true. There were two policemen standing in front of me. They said they wanted to get some information from me to assist with an investigation. Although I was surprised, I quickly regained my composure and agreed to the police's suggestion. Very quickly, the policeman pulled out a photo of this woman, from his pocket. He asked if I had met this person. The woman in the photo also lived in this apartment and has been missing for many days. I told them I didn't know the woman. Then they told me the woman in the picture was missing. After that, they greeted me and continued to knock on each door to ask about the whereabouts of this woman. The police did not specify why she went missing and how long she had been missing for, but I didn't care much about this either. A few days later, I seemed to have forgotten this, until one night. That night, with overtime, I came home late and was about to get into the shower. It was 11 p.m. I know that taking a bath at night is not good, but if I don't take a bath, I can't sleep. This time of night is the most relaxing time for me. I let my hair down freely and bent over to wash it. The strands of hair flutter in front of my eyes, but enough for me to see the void ahead through my hair. And then suddenly, I saw a pair of bare feet standing in front of me. I am sure my heart stopped beating for a moment. Feeling scared, I immediately raised my head. I reached to close the running tap. Every hair on my body was standing up. Looking around once more, I gradually calmed down. I thought maybe I was seeing things. It was just an illusion. But then a thought flashed in my mind. I gradually felt the surrounding air become dense and colder. To prove that what I was thinking was just bullshit, I decided to try it again. I slowly lowered my head and glanced over the hairs in front of me. This time, no longer barefoot, standing in front of me was a woman with shoulder-length hair and her hands hanging down. I panicked and shouted, then fell on the floor. The woman disappeared once again. I reached out for the towel and hurried to cover myself, then ran out of the bathroom fast. Until I lay on the bed, I was still trembling. That night, I couldn't sleep because I was still so scared. After that night, I no longer dared to bathe at home. I have a colleague who was single, and she was very happy to help me with this. The strange thing was that while at her house, nothing happened to me. My colleague assured me that it was just the new apartment that made me feel this way. I also hoped that everything would be fine. After spending a few days with my colleagues, settling down and feeling my mood regain balance, I returned home. At home, I rarely cook, but I had a habit of boiling water for myself with an electric kettle to drink, rather than ordering the water available in the apartment. Every night, before going to bed, I had a habit of drinking a glass of warm water. This made it easier for me to fall asleep. Indeed, after drinking water, I lay in bed and tried to fall asleep. But for a long while, I felt the air around me was extremely cold. The cold and floating feeling made me feel like I was being immersed in water. Suddenly, I felt short of breath, and my chest felt heavy. Then, I saw a floating object in front of me. I was speechless, unable to realize what it was. As my eyes gradually adjusted, I realized it was the figure of the woman with long, loose hair. The woman was moving closer and closer to me. Right now, I couldn't help but just stare at her with wide eyes. As her face approached me, the feeling of fear grew larger. It was a swollen and slimy face, like a corpse that had been soaked in water for a long time. The patches of skin on her body peeling off and fell into the water disgustingly. The person moved closer, almost on top of me. I was too scared that my hands and feet were stiff, unable to move. I just gasped and stared forward. I shouted out in fear, giving all my strength to try and get out of the situation. When I sat up in the bed, I realized it was just a dream. Even so, until a while later, I still felt terrified, wondering who she was. Why did I see that woman so often? The nightmare made me so anxious the next morning. I dragged my heavy footsteps out of the house warily. Missing notices are posted everywhere in the apartment corridors and staircases. It was an image of a lost woman. I suddenly realized something. How did that monstrous spirit resemble her so much? As I was thinking this, I was about to raise my hand to take a photo to get a closer look, but I suddenly felt scared. Really not wanting to believe it was true, I tried to flip through it to stop thinking about it. When I stepped out of the gate of the apartment building, I saw a group of old women gathered and gossiping. I'd never communicated with them, and neither did they, but it was strange, and when they saw me passing by, a woman took the initiative to call me back. She asked me if there were any strange smells in the drinking water, like a dead mouse. She then asked if I had sleep paralysis lately, or had dreamed of ghosts. Another woman also mentioned the woman who had been missing for many days, all of them seeing her ghost. I was startled to react at this time. It turned out that I was not alone with this problem, and all of these people were like me. All of them doubted that the polluted water had anything to do with her. They must report this to the police. A few hours later, the police arrived. Everyone living in the apartment building was making a fuss. The police were now checking the water tank on the top floor of the apartment building. Something must have happened with the communal pool on the rooftop, for sure. That explains the problems they'd had recently, as well as the stench from the water. After watching the police pick up a body, everyone became extremely scared. After bringing a swollen, rotten body out of the water tank, they continued to use a fishing racket to remove something from the inside. It was scary, because the victim's whole body was decomposed in the water tank. What the police picked up might be the fat and rotting meat. When the police took the body out of the apartment building, everyone could smell a terrible stench that followed. The police also arrested the missing girl's husband and escorted him to the station. A few days later, the case was made public in the newspapers. The real killer was the husband of the missing girl. He killed her and threw her body in the pool terrace on the roof of the building. After everything was cleared up, I was sick for a long time. Every time I think about drinking dead body water, I feel very nauseous.
A few years ago, a strange story happened in my village. At that time, it was the season of high water, and most people did not dare to go by boat alone to the middle of the river of fear of being swept away by the water. Only one man in the village voluntarily drove his boat away and disappeared for many days. Police and rescue forces heard the news and quickly arrived, gathering on one side of the bank to find the missing man. But days had passed and the rescuers and locals could not find any trace of the man. All hope seemed to be lost. The lifeboats of the rescue team were parked all over the river. Drivers were busy searching in the hope of finding the person in distress. The victim's wife and children were also present at the scene. Everyone was worried and thinking about the worst case scenario. Despite searching for many days with many different search methods, the man's whereabouts have not yielded any other result. The man's wife and children were in so much pain that they cried and swelled their eyes, but everyone was hoping that a miracle would happen. At the end of the day, the rescue team drove a canoe ashore to a port with the same sad expression as the first day of the search. No trace of the man was found. The rescue team thought the man was swept into the ocean by the water, so his body could not be found. When the wife heard that, she collapsed and burst into tears, making the already tense scene even more painful and sorrowful. Suddenly, a person quietly approached from afar, carrying a large bag full of incense and other ritual objects. People in the village realized that she was a blind older woman living alone, working as a fortune teller in her town. She quietly brought the offerings to the shore and prepared to begin her work. The police and the rescue team saw her gradually heading to the shore. Everyone was worried and advised her to stop because they were afraid she would slip and fall into the swirling whirlpool. But she was already familiar with the way here, so when she just reached the edge of the cliff, she sat down, surprising many people. The police stood around her, attentively watching every action she was doing. Her whole body exuded a certain mystery that made people see extremely curious. The older woman gently took out a large bundle of incense and began to light it up. The incense smoke quickly rose high and gave off an enchanting fragrance. The policeman standing on the shore looked at her. Everyone was surprised and confused, not knowing what the older woman's purpose was. But no matter who was surprised or kept asking for her, she sat still with her eyes closed, her mouth mumbling, reciting the incantation, not bothered by anyone. After her bundle of incense burned, she took out a stack of paper and rolled it up, then continued to light it. Then she let the paper burn freely on the ground, forming a small spot just enough for her to burn the votive paper. Despite the policemen standing around her looking on in surprise, her manipulation was proficient. The ashes of the gold and silver banknote shone brightly and then rose into the air, then gently fell to the surface of the water like leaves. The scene was a bit lyrical, but also sad. The burning smell of paper mixed with the smell of incense in the place where the older woman was sitting also made people feel stung. Many young policemen offered to stop her and bring her to the shore to avoid the older woman's danger, but the elderly police captain stopped them. Everyone around knew that the older woman was the last hope. If people didn't let the older woman try, it would be hard to find the dead man's body. The older woman's face clearly showed her concentration, not wanting to be bothered by anyone. When there was a slight sharpness on the older woman's face, it was also the time when the white smoke in the air changed, gradually appearing with a human face and a strange, scary look. The smoke rose straight into the air, revealing a man's face filled with anguish at the fear and astonishment of those present. The smoke slowly moved and formed a complete face with eyes, a nose, mouth, and hair like the man who was in trouble. The policemen who witnessed the incident were also surprised, only opening their mouths in awe. The wife witnessed the smoke and quickly recognized her husband's image through the white smoke, so she panicked and quickly covered her child's eyes with her hand. The crowd gathered more and more. Everyone was curious to see the older woman perform the magic. After a while of casting spells, the older woman's ritual finally ended. The older woman opened her eyes and looked at the space in front of her. The ocean waves finally became calmer. The older woman told the policemen that they could continue their search. Although everyone did not understand what she meant, they all gathered around the older woman to help her up out of courtesy. After that, she quietly left. While walking, she told the victim's wife and children to take a shirt from the victim, wave it in front of the river, and call out the victim's name. This action would help the victim's soul find its body and bring it to the shore. Besides, she also said that the soul of the dead was feeling very cold. The older woman advised people to quickly bring the body home to bury before having the next victim. After the older woman had left, the people left at the scene performed the ritual according to the older woman's instructions. After a while, strange water bubbles appeared under the water, as if someone was under the water. Just a moment later, the victim's body also slowly emerged from it, revealing a swollen and pale face, which was being soaked in water for too long. It looked extremely scary. No one expected that the victim's body could easily float to the surface without the help of any lifeguards. The policemen and lifeguards were all stunned, speechless at what was happening. No one could deny the strangeness of this story. The body slowly drifted closer to the shore. The wife saw her husband's body and rushed to him, bursting into tears of pain. Relatives of the victim immediately fell to the ground. The painful scene touched everyone present. Locals and policemen rushed to comfort the victim's family, and rescuers quickly sailed to the victim's place to bring the body ashore. After finding the victim's body, the family immediately brought the victim's body home for burial. The local people all sympathized with the plight of this family. They took the initiative to arrange the funeral for the victim on behalf of all his family.
This is a true scary story that once happened to me. That day, to celebrate the successful undertaking of the new construction entity in town, I asked my twin brother to have some beers with me. Actually, it was this guy that helped me easily undertake the construction for the main bridge in town. Back in days, I went to the city to receive construction education while he stayed at his hometown working as a manager. As we were drinking, we recalled our past memories. We had always been close together when we were kids. My brother asked me about our parents, as he hadn't seen them for a while. I reassured him that they were still fine and missed him terribly, and they would come visit him soon. We spent the whole afternoon drinking, talking till it was getting dark. As we had gotten a bit wasted, we decided to leave for home. My brother suggested walking to his house, as it would be a great way to sober up fast, and also we could do some sightseeing on the way. Since the construction area was near to his house, I agree with his idea, as I always wanted to take a walk around there, so we staggered all the way home arm in arm. I didn't know if it was the childhood memories that became so vivid to me at that time. I suddenly told my brother to bathe in the river with me. It was this river that me and my brother usually went to take a bath in back in the days. Together, we walked down the riverside. The soft green grass appeared so poetically beautiful under the moonlight. Old habits die hard. We took off our clothes soon as we got to the river, just like the days when we were kids. We swam rapidly in the water. The atmosphere in the place was still the same. Nothing had changed since the day I left for the city. After swimming for a while, we continued to soak in the water. All of a sudden, the water became colder, which seemed bizarre to me. I asked my brother about it, but was quickly reassured that it was just a normal phenomenon. As I was listening to him, I was startled by something before my eyes. In a moment, I saw a kid appearing behind my brother in a scary manner. He let out a smile that was widened to his ears. His eyes were dead white, and the face was strangely pale, looking lifelessly. I rubbed my eyes, tried to regain my composure while assuring myself that it was just an hallucination. Seeing me acting bizarre, my brother asked me if I was okay. I said I saw something behind him, but at that moment the water surface was still, and there was nothing out of the ordinary taking place. As the water became colder and colder, I rushed my brother to swim ashore quickly. As soon as I finished my sentence, I was startled when something freezingly cold touched my legs. The feeling was so realistic, despite being pretty nervous. I didn't want to say it to my brother, as he wouldn't believe me either, My premonition told me to get ashore as soon as possible. Seeing the anxious look on my face, my brother agreed to swim ashore as he worried I would catch a cold. As we were on our way towards land, something suddenly grabbed me and pulled me down. I let out a terrified scream which instantly caught my brother's attention. Now, as I was sinking into the cold water, only my hands were seen above the surface as I waved for help. Right that moment, my brother came to my rescue just in time. However, there was a mysterious force trying to pull me down again. It was considerably greater than that of a human. Eventually, my brother succeeded in his attempt to save me from death. He grabbed me tightly with one of his arms, then used all his strength to make it ashore. As we made it onto land, he let me lay on the grass while performing CPR on me. After resuscitation, I slowly regained my conscience. My brother helped me up, then asked me what had happened. I told him there was something trying to pull me down to the bottom, but I didn't have any idea what it was. I told him that it must be something spooky, which I assumed was the ghost I'd previously seen standing behind him, that caused the incident. I pointed at the bruise near my ankle. There was still a black mark that had the shape of a human hand left on it. How terrifyingly clear the mark looked. Now, as I had recalled everything, I remembered looking down as I was being pulled down and saw something that would surely haunt me for the rest of my life. That creepy creatures looked at me and let out a demonic smile. It looked like a child's corpse. He grabbed my legs tightly and stared into my soul as if he wanted to eat me alive. But what was even more scarier was that the child looked quite familiar to me. We were terrified by what had just happened, but none of us had any explanation for the creature to appear and try to kill me that night. Later I returned to my city. One day, as I was enjoying a sauna, something grabbed my legs and pulled strongly, which made me startle. As things happened so unexpectedly, I couldn't do anything but to let out a scream. As I was dragged into the pool, I once again saw the demonic smile of that creepy creature I encountered at the river that night. It somehow had followed me here and tried to drown me again. Despite being pulled down, I was still aware of people nearby rushing to help me. It took them a while to hold my hands and drag me out of the pool. Everyone was astounded. They had no idea how I got myself in such a situation, as it would be out of the ordinary for someone to have a pool accident in this steam room since the water was shallow. Suddenly I had a strange feeling as I sensed something familiar to me presented here. It was him, my twin brother. He was standing next to me. How spooky that was. I remembered being saved by 3 people, but now only 2 of them were here to be seen. Was it true that the other guy was my twin brother? What the heck was happening here? Why did that ghost keep following me? Since that day, I didn't dare to go into the water again, as I was in fear of being assaulted by the ghost. It was him, my twin brother who I'd lost in that river 20 years ago. I could have saved him on that fated day, but instead, I let him die in that cold river bottom.
This story is about Jiro's family, who just moved into a new house. The couple also had a lovely and obedient little daughter named Anna. While her mother was busy moving stuff, little Anna enjoyed jumping and running around. Then she opened the window to see what was outside. It seemed that the scenery outside did not disappoint Anna. A cool and gentle breeze blew in. It excited her, so she called her mother. Hearing her call, Yuki ran to her. The scenery behind was beautiful, just like what the family desired for so long. The pond behind the house refreshed the air. Jiro's family even planned to breed some fish in that pond. However, Anna was curious and asked her mother why no creature existed in that pond. Yuki couldn't really explain. She pulled Anna inside to help tidy things up in time for dinner. But it didn't stop there. An incident happened to their family on the first night in their new home. At midnight, Anna started twitching. She had a pale face and was sweating profusely. The little girl suddenly had a high fever. Seeing Anna's appearance, Yuri was extremely worried. Anna's condition became worse and worse. She began to tremble and breathe strenuously. Seeing this, Jiro and Yuri hurried to get a thick blanket to cover her body, but it didn't get any better. Yuri was so worried that she could not sit still. Looking at her child with such a high fever, it creeped her out. Suddenly, Anna woke up, but her condition was still very bad. Not only that, she also seemed very panicked. Anna, after waking up, got into Yuri's lap and hugged her tight. Her small arms clutched her mother's shoulders fearfully. After a while, when she was more settled, Anna stammered out a few words. But Yuri didn't really know what her fear was. She then gently reassured her child's safety. The little girl was in her mother's arms, taking a deep breath and then pointed at the wall. According to Anna, she saw a man and a woman standing just next to the closet. Their faces were swollen and disfigured, as if they had been immersed in water for a long time. Their looks were terrifying. Jiro and Yuri looked towards the closet, but did not see a single figure. Anna was hallucinating, wasn't she? Although they could not see anything, both Jiro and his wife had a bad feeling about this. Feeling like something was wrong, Jiro then told his wife to take care of his daughter and he would go outside to get something. After saying this, Jiro rushed outside with some kind of plan. Just a few minutes later, he came back and in his hand was a large knife and a wooden cutting board. According to Jiro, when he was a child in the neighborhood, there were many children like Anna, who always said that they could see ghosts. And the grandparents would use a large knife and a cutting board to make noise. This would drive away those souls every time. While making noise, Jiro also shouted loudly, asking the ghosts to leave his house and let go of their daughter. Yuri watched her husband's actions, hoping everything would be fine. Thinking that this new house had a problem, the next morning Yuri called her mother to help. Anna's grandmother saw her current condition and was also very surprised. However, before coming here, she also invited a feng shui master to help. The feng shui master looked around the house. He said the house currently had a strong miasmatic atmosphere, and that the lake behind the house was the most serious problem. Anna's grandmother also told him in more detail about the two ghosts that Anna saw last night. Listening to the appearance of the ghosts soaked in water, his gut told him to ask everyone to go to the back of the lake. Arriving at the lake, they did not see what the master was looking at, but his face immediately went sharp, frowning and looking panicked. It seemed like he saw what Anna saw last night. On the pond surface now floated two extremely scary ghosts. Because he was used to seeing ghosts, the feng shui master could still remain calm. He just slowly turned his back and walked like nothing happened. Anna's grandma and Yuri saw the expression of the master and were very curious. But when they tried to ask, he just kept silent and said nothing. After coming back in the house, the master still refused to say a word, only carefully inspecting the wall next to the closet. Even the mold on the wall was very carefully examined by him. Jiro and Yuri also saw these stains when they moved in. Finally, after a long silence, the master said that he saw a man and a woman above the lake earlier. After listening, Yuri and her mother-in-law immediately panicked. They did not expect that about the water pond in the backyard. Also, they did not expect their long-time dream home to have such a terrifying secret. Not only did the two souls still live there, but they also wanted a child. And Anna was the one that the other two spirits were aiming for. According to the master, the only way to now help Anna is to get out of their sight. He advised them to make a paper dummy to deceive the two spirits. That night, following his instructions, Yuri brought a dummy that looked exactly like her daughter to the edge of the pond. First, she burned some votive papers. She silently pleaded to beg the two souls to liberate and spare her family. When the flame got bigger, Yuri threw the prepared paper dummy in. Then she began to beg, hoping that the two spirits would accept the child she had sent to them and let go of Anna. Yuri's request just stopped. The fire instantly grew louder, burning the dummy. It seemed the devotion of the mother had been accepted by the two souls. After doing exactly what the feng shui master told her, Yuri got up and went back to the house. The fire was still burning, but it was getting smaller. Beside the fire was water, and it suddenly moved in a vortex that grew bigger and bigger. Yuri could hear the water, but she just glanced without daring to turn back. On the pond surface were the two spirits. They were holding the hand of a little girl and walking away. In front of the window where the pond can be seen, now stood a mirror. And because of the mirror, Anna had not seen the two spirits again. A few days later, after hearing the news about Yuri's family, all the neighbors came over to visit. Just like what the feng shui master said, the two souls were a couple, but their families forbade they be together. So they committed suicide. There were many people who moved in here, but all of them had to move out within 3 days because of their harassment. To be sure, Yuri sewed a curtain placed in the window where the pond could be seen. And since then, nothing weird happened to their family anymore.
It was the story I heard from Lao Lu in the village. He worked on the construction site. He cleaned the construction site during the day and helped look after it at night to avoid stealing steel and cement. That time, Lao Lu followed the team of engineers to repair the bridge in the evening. Lao Lu set up a tent and slept on the unfinished bridge. On weekdays, he ate dinner, drank tea and listened to the radio because he alone had no other pastimes. At 8 o'clock in the evening, he went out to inspect the construction site one more time before going to bed afterward. He turned off the radio, lit his flashlight and went out to check. The bridge was only half repaired, no one crossed. On the construction site, there was also someone's sand and tools piled up, nothing too valuable. Lao Lu looked at the front and back with his flashlight. When he saw nothing happened, he thought everything was probably fine. He returned to the tent and prepared to go to sleep. But when he opened the tent door, he heard a woman crying behind him. Lao Lu wondered if he had gone to check and found no one. So why were there women crying? He looked in the direction of the sound to check. He discovered something very shocking. As mentioned before, the bridge has not been repaired yet. Only half of it has been repaired. There were still some bridge piers on the river that had not been connected to the bridge body, but at this time Lao Lu saw a woman crying on the middle bridge pier in the river. At first Lao Lu was also taken aback. After that he calmed himself for a moment. Then he looked at it with a flashlight and wanted to ask this woman how to get to the pier. But he was surprised when he used the flashlight. The woman on the bridge suddenly disappeared and the crying stopped. Lao Lu thought that maybe he had seen the wrong thing with these blurry eyes, so he turned off the flashlight and went back to the tent. The next day, while everyone was having lunch, Lao Lu told the story of last night to the workers. He started telling the story and everyone was listening attentively. As soon as Lao Lu mentioned a bizarre story last night, the workers gathered a lot and asked him what he had seen. Lao Lu vividly recounted how he saw a woman crying on the jetty. Lao Lu pointed everyone to the pier that was lying there. This river was deep. It was difficult for ordinary people to climb up to the jetty in the middle of the river. The workers felt that Lao Lu's words were absurd. Lao Lu, a construction guard, was alone at night on the construction site and saw a mysterious person. Or did Lao Lu meet a ghost? Some people didn't believe it, and some people thought that Lao Lu didn't seem to be lying. Then they all remembered the previous shipwreck in the river. It turned out that a few days ago a boat upstream they were under construction sank, killing 2 men and a woman. The 2 men's bodies were recovered, but the woman's body had not been found. Someone asked if Lao Lu had to see the ghost of the drowning woman. Although Lao Lu's description of the woman sounded similar to the victim, some people still thought that there was no ghost at all. The story went on like that all day. In the evening, Lao Lu inspected the construction site as usual and did not hear the woman's cry anymore, so he returned to the tent and fell asleep. But in the middle of the night while Lao Lu was sleeping, that crying came again, sounding lamentable and sad. In the stillness of the night he heard very clearly Lao Lu sitting up, groaning. He dressed quickly and took a flashlight out of the tent. He wanted to find out if he was dizzy. He followed that sound to go to the bridge. The night scene was scary and creepy. From a distance, Lao Lu saw a woman sitting on the opposite jetty, crying there, very distressed. Lao Lu gathered his courage and shouted at the woman he did not understand what he was doing. As a result, the woman jumped off the pier. This thing was strange. This thing scared Lao Lu. He wanted to rush to save people, but he was too far from the pier. He stood dumbfounded as he shone his flashlight on the pier opposite his eyes. The woman disappeared halfway after the jump, and there was no sound after falling into the water. Lao Lu used a flashlight to shine on the pier many times, but the woman was nowhere to be seen. At this time, Lao Lu believed that the woman was a female ghost. Early the following morning, Lao Lu found Master Li, the contractor, and told him about seeing a female ghost. Boss Li was not happy to hear that. He thought Lao Lu was spreading superstition and spreading false rumors. Boss Li also said that if this affected workers' work, he would dismiss Lao Lu. Master Li scolded Lao Lu a few times and then left angrily. Ignoring Master Li, Lao Lu bought some underworld banknotes and burned them on the bridge after dark. It was that if you dreamed of a dead person, it was a bad omen. In such a case, you could burn some underworld banknotes. Lao Lu burned paper money for the female ghost on the bridge. It seemed to have really worked since that night. Lao Lu had not heard the crying for 3 days in a row, nor seen the female ghost again. On the 4th day, the workers began to pour the piers. At that time, the facilities were still poor. There were not many types of artificial machines like today. Workers poured the first layer of concrete and then waited for it to dry before pouring the next layer. The strange thing was that the bridge pier poured the day before. The next day it collapsed, so it could not be repaired for several days. The foreman couldn't help but report the strange incident to Boss Li. Boss Li suspected that the foreman had cut down on the materials, which was why this happened. The foreman was so scared that he swore he would never do such a thing. Boss Li believed that the foreman said, But the pier still couldn't continue pouring concrete. Was it really haunted? When Boss Lee heard the word ghost, he reminded the foreman. Boss Lee didn't say a word, but he thought about something in his heart. First, he reprimanded Lao Lu for engaging in superstition, which was actually just to let the workers work in peace. Then he stopped the project for a day. The following morning, a small car ran up the bridge. Boss Lee especially invited Master Zhang to help him see the date and calculate Feng Shui. Boss Lee led Master Zhang to the bridgehead and showed Master Zhang the pier where the accident happened. Master Zhang looked at the pier and his expression changed. Master Zhang said as soon as he arrived at the pier, he felt overwhelmed with gloom. Master Chung said that the bridge might be entangled in some resentment, so it had been built many times without success. When Boss Lee heard about it, he panicked and prayed to his master for a way to solve the problem. Master Zhang asked Boss Lee if anyone had died during the construction of the pier, because he felt that there was a contractor with a dark heart. When a worker had an accident, he directly buried the victim's body with reinforced concrete. Boss Lee swore that there was absolutely none and that he would not work so unscrupulously for the money. Master Zhang looked at Boss Lee and felt that he was not lying. Master Chung looked at the piers and said that the problem should lie in the water. Boss Lee hurriedly hired a good diver nicknamed the Water Rat, and at the same time found another boat and told the diver to go under the pier to check what was wrong. Lao Lu also joined the crowd, curiously waiting for the results. The diver rowed the boat out and under the pier alone. Everyone on the shore was also looking down. After taking a deep breath, the diver dived straight into the water. The sinking part of the pier was 5 or 6 meters deep, and the diver tried his best to dive. But under the pier he saw nothing but some gravel. He dived to the other side of the pier again, trying to see if there was anything unusual on the other side. But as soon as he dived, he was so scared that he choked on the water. He saw that some of the rocks under the bridge were cement blocks with many exposed steel bars. A woman's body was hooked by steel rods and hung there. The body swayed continuously in the water. The diver quickly surfaced, shouting to Boss Lee on the shore that there was a female body under the pier. Boss Lee selected 2 more diving workers from among the workers and promised to pay more to bring the woman's body ashore with the diver. Lao Lu also followed Boss Lee to see how things were going. The woman's body, despite being soaked in water for many days, still did not rot and swell but was soggy white with a lamentable expression. Master Zhang thought that woman didn't want to die, so her face was full of resentment. After being compared by the police, the female lead's body was the one who was not found in the shipwreck a few days ago. Boss Lee also spent a lot of money to let Master Zhang perform the magic. Finally, the bridge was completed and had been in use for many years. After hearing Lao Lu's story, I even went to see it. It was just that the symbols on the jetty have long since disappeared and were no longer visible. It was the camping trip that has had me obsessing till this day. It was an autumn day. The weather was chilly. Myself, Leo, and Nana decided to camp in the forest. Haha, you are exhausted after a short stroll, just as weak as a girl. Leo and Nana kept making fun of me and laughing at me. I suggested pausing to relax while walking and taking deep breaths. Guys, can we take a break here for a while? Hang on, come on, we'll be there in a minute, Leo said. Nana quickly agreed and encouraged me to speed up. My health wasn't that good, so I felt fatigued easily, which was worse by the fact that seeing Nana, whom I admired, appeared to be closer to Leo. Those two worked well together. After this trip, I should reconsider hanging out with Leo. It was apparent that he knew I liked Nana, yet he still behaved like that. Perhaps he was trying to get an advantage over me. It was so irritating. Nana, in the contrary to my irritated face, was exceedingly joyful and excited. It truly bothered me to watch Nana enjoying a good time with my best friend. Even though I complained, I kept going because of Nana. This mountain location was always famous for its odd and intriguing stories. Therefore, it was seldomly visited by people. Only those who enjoyed exploring and solving mysteries came here to find out what was going on. We finally arrived at the campground after a long hike. The higher we went, the more spectacular the view got. Nana looked enthralled by the landscape along the trip, but I was nearly exhausted. Nana approached the cliff. The landscape was truly beautiful. Nana was still like a naughty child, standing at the cliff and tried to scream loudly to hear her voice reverberated from afar. Nana's screams reverberated across the hills, and the sound was odd. Leo offered to race again when it was just a few yards to the campsite. "Oh, we can race there now. Whoever loses has to clean up after the camp. If you lose, John, you have to clean up." Before he could complete the statement, the two of them bolted forward, leaving me behind. They rushed ahead no matter how loud I howled, and I truly didn't have the strength to run anymore. They left me behind, alone in the woods. If I could travel back in time, I would surely come back immediately. I crouched behind them, but I couldn't see them at all. By the time I recognized it, I couldn't hear the two of them anymore, and I knew I was lost. I didn't think much anymore because I was so weary and frustrated. All I wanted to do was relax. Going a bit further, I came upon a small lake in the heart of the forest and decided to stop for a while. I casually picked up a stone and tossed it into the lake, thinking that if I stayed here for a while, I'd return by myself. The rock bounced many times on the water, which made me feel a bit better. Probably I wouldn't hang out with Leo anymore after this time, and I didn't like Nana any longer. I was sitting alone, hungry and depressed, and I wasn't sure what to do next. As I was wishing for a meal to fall in front of me, something caught my attention from afar. As I wished, it was true that heaven never disappoints. What was the point of being with the other two guys? A fish came out of nowhere beneath the surface of the water. It flipped its belly over down as if going to die. Or was it in the process of giving birth? I'd heard that while fish were spawning, they float on their backs. The fish, however, froze and floated towards me the following second. I hastily jumped up and grabbed the nearest dry branch in order to bring the fish ashore. While trying to capture the fish, I felt that at least today I would have a nice fish supper. But grasping this fish by a branch was not as simple as I thought. After a long time, the more I tried, the more the fish floated away. Hungry and exhausted and unable to capture the fish, I became furious. I was determined to try again, and if it still didn't work, I would give up and walk back, leaving the stupid forest behind. But then I noticed the fish vanished. I couldn't remain standing still while trying to grab the fish, leading me to lose my equilibrium. I was terrified at the moment, and because I didn't know how to swim, I fell right into the lake. I struggled since the lake water was so cold that it was difficult for me to move my legs. I had practically nothing else I could do at this point, so I tried to scream in terror. The more I wept and struggled, the quicker I sunk and started to lose strength. There was no sound in the jungle. My body stiffened as a result of the cold water, and I couldn't scream any longer since my throat was painful. In my desperate state, I thought nothing could be worse than this. Then, I suddenly felt someone tugging my legs under the water. It tried to drag me into the water. I couldn't do anything since those hands were so powerful. It wanted to drown me, and I collapsed into absolute helplessness. My stomach was filled with lake water. Would my life be that short? Tears streamed down my cheeks as a hand emerged behind me from under the water, piqued my attention. Turning my head to look carefully, I noticed a boy who was sinking together with me. Why was there a boy here? My entire body couldn't move at this point, and the boy appeared to be drifting towards me. At that time, many similar cries broke out and I subconsciously looked back. Then all of a sudden a horrific image flashed in front of my eyes which I would never forget for the rest of my life. Children floated around me. They appeared with green skin and white eyes. They appeared more and more until they engulfed me in an instant. Their expressions were terrifying. They began to scream as haunting sad moans began to reverberate. The water began to overwhelm my face as my subconscious made the last feeble scream for help. At that very time, I noticed a man. He was racing towards me, and it wasn't an illusion. I could sense the warmth of humanity. Was I rescued, or was I just dreaming? I shrank away and everything after that was lost to me. After a while I learned about the lake and I believed something awful might have occurred, exactly as I guessed. Many years ago, a group of children were taken here for a picnic by their teacher, but due to her mistake, more than half of the children fell into the lake to play in the water. As a consequence, everyone drowned. Those who lived around this area knew it well. The ghosts of children were always here, and they created countless illusions to lure the living into the water. Then they would drown them to death.
This story was a case that happened in my hometown in 2013, which made my whole village shake. Early that morning, people in the area discovered the body of a young girl floating in the sea, so they hurriedly called the police immediately. When the police came to investigate, the girl had been dead for many days. Her whole body was swollen with water, but her face clearly showed shock and panic. The face of the victim made many people in the village haunted for a long time. Everyone guessed that this unfortunate girl had encountered something terrible before the accident. The police immediately arrived, performed an autopsy, and began contacting the victim's next of kin. Not long after reporting about the girl, an elderly couple immediately appeared from afar, rushing over with a look of both panic and pain. The two quickly approached the corpse, knelt on the ground, and burst into tears with a very heartbreaking look. They also called the victim their daughter. Those present at the crime scene at the time were all touched by the scene and simultaneously sighed heavily. Both the elderly couple were the only ones who dared to touch the girl except for the police. But when the father touched his daughter's hand, immediately a strange phenomenon occurred. The abdomen of the body suddenly made a sound like boiling water, and the victim's mouth suddenly spewed black, foul-smelling water into her father's face. The dirty water on the older man's face made the people around him feel a little disgusted. But after the water was shot out of the girl's body, the swollen abdomen also began to shrink. Since then, the strange phenomenon has not yet been seen by the police and the people, so it was a bit difficult to understand, especially the new young police officer who was handling this case. During that day, the young policeman didn't say too much. His mind was only focused on the young girl's death and wanted to know the exact cause. Some people in the area said that this young girl was the youngest daughter of the older couple. For a long time, the girl did not get along with her parents and only got into an accident after a quarrel with her parents and drowned. But the theories about the girl's drowning did indeed make the young policeman feel a bit absurd. While waiting for the final results of the investigation, he could not come to any further conclusions. But one day, an invisible power appeared and urged them to solve the case once and for all at all costs. Since the day the young girl's body was brought to the police station for autopsy, the victim's father seemed to be at the police station all the time.
The policeman didn't know what the older man came here for, but every time he met the doctor who performed the autopsy to discuss it. The last time the policeman met this older man was one morning at the police station's investigation room, which was used for autopsies. After discussing with the doctor in charge, the old man bowed his head and left sadly, without staying any longer. Then the older man quietly passed by the policemen who were on duty to investigate this case, including the young policeman. The young policeman also wanted to start a conversation with the victim's father, but when he looked up at the older man's face, he suddenly stopped. Within a short period, he saw that the older man's face was covered with terrifying pimples, many sores that looked like they were infected. Not stopping there, the older man's body also began to appear with very strange fishy odors that the police could not explain. The older man passed the policeman, his eyes only slightly raised to look at the policeman, then he sadly lowered his face and went out, without asking the policeman anything related to his daughter's case. Looking at the older man's gaunt face, the young policeman initially thought that this man was so heartbroken about his daughter's death that he had become like this. But when he saw the older man quietly go home without asking him about the investigation, the policeman suddenly had some doubts in his heart. He decided to go back and ask the doctors who had been in contact with the man to ask about the situation. The policeman asked a staff member at the Forensic Institute to take him to meet the doctor in charge of the autopsy on the young girl's body, and said that it was for investigational purposes. He was immediately taken to see the elderly doctor in charge of examining the body of the girl and to ask about the case for details. The first thing he mentioned was that the victim's father appeared at the investigation agency. This doctor also honestly recounted that this older man went to see a forensic doctor every day to negotiate the handover of his daughter's body for burial without having to do an autopsy. This inadvertently aroused suspicion in the young policeman's heart and also partly confirmed that what he was thinking was true. After that, the doctor said that he would tell the young policeman about his incomprehensibility during his time in contact with the old man. According to the doctor, this older man seemed to be suffering from a serious disease that caused the skin to appear with scary pimples and sores. But what made this forensic doctor feel strange was that the fishy smell of corpses was clinging to that man's body. This could prove that the other girl was carrying some injustice in her. Hearing this, the young policeman also felt suspicious, like she was unjustly for her death, or just wanted to point out the older man as the killer and the girl close to cling to the older man. When the young policeman heard that, he immediately made his final decision, firmly affirming that it was the girl's father who caused her death. It seemed that the conversion between the policeman and the forensic doctor accidentally let the victim's father overhear it. The older man hurriedly looked at the officers in the investigation institute and quickly went out. Seeing that, the young policeman promptly called the man over to ask questions and arrest him at the police station for questioning about the case. The father finally had to confess all his actions because he couldn't stand the nightmares that his daughter brought. At the police station, the father confessed that he was the one who killed his daughter and staged the drowning. For fear of being discovered, he went to the medical examiner to ask not to do an autopsy on his daughter's body. What caused him to kill his daughter, this man refused to disclose to the police, but only sincerely confessed the whole process of his crime. According to this man, on the day of the incident, he and his daughter had a conflict. He accidentally pushed his daughter down, causing her to die without knowing anything.